さて。
What is going on, guys? Welcome to part 2 of my Beerus guide. If you guys missed part 1, talking about the basics in general what Beerus is, make sure to check the description down below where I will link that video. But for this one though, welcome to part 2 where we're going to be going over basically everything involving Beerus's orbs. We're going to be talking about his neutral, we're going to be talking about his general block strings, we're going to talk about how he does his mix-ups, and we are going to be talking about his Oki. With all that being said, let us begin with how you play neutral with Beerus. Alright, so how does Beerus play neutral? Well, he doesn't play neutral in the traditional sense. He doesn't have a great grounded ki blasts. He doesn't have any beams. His air ki blasts are okay. So what is his big thing with neutral? Well, it's basically all about his orbs, which I'm sure everyone will have already guessed, but I like to keep you guys in suspense anyways. Yes, it is all about Beerus's orbs, making it both really simple because his entire game plan revolves around one thing, but at the same time really complicated because there are many options on how you do it, and there are many ways that it can lose. So first off, the best way to set up orbs is IAD back plus an orb. IAD back plus an orb tends to be the safest way to get an orb set up. You have less recovery than if you just try and place one on the ground. And in general, it's the safest way to do it while also being able to set up in the air, giving it a longer time on screen. The other way to do it is his sneeze. His sneeze probably being the best version on the ground due to the fact that he has the ability to cancel it. So not only can you sneeze and immediately fling one right afterwards, but in case someone mashes 2H or mashes Super Dash on you, you can try to immediately cancel the 2H and try and punish them for trying to 2H you. And the other one, the most powerful option he has in neutral when it comes to his orbs, but at the same time the riskiest, is his 2-3 success. If you get these set up, your game plan is basically set. So the absolute best time to be Beerus when you're playing neutral is when you get these orbs out. There are a couple ways to do this. One, if your opponent is up in the air a lot, and you don't think they're just going to full screen super dash you, then you basically have a free way of setting this up. It is 48 frames, so it does take a bit to get started, but if they're up here, not going to do that. Otherwise, if you have any kind of neutral assist at all, be it a C assist, a beam, you can just call it and set up orbs. You can do it that way. Or even if you don't and you just want to be a little safer, if your opponent's just going to be tossing ki blasts, specifically if a character doesn't have beams that's just going to go through your assists, you can basically throw out your assist kind of as a shield. Don't do it if you only have like 1%, like 5% health on your character, because your character is going to die. But there's nothing wrong with the idea of just basically, I don't want to say wasting an assist, but using an assist to body block a ki blast or two, or several, in order for you to get these orbs set up. Because Beerus's game plan just goes through the roof on how strong it is when he gets all 6 orbs. Now, when you get these orbs though, what do? So the best way to do it is the same way you set up the orbs, and it's the safest way to do it. You IAD back, and you hit a button. IAD back heavy usually is the strongest due to the angle it kicks. The IAD back flick will send them slightly forward, and then if you do IAD back medium, it's going to go pretty high in the air, which is good if people spend time in the air, but if they're at all close to the ground, like a lot of times people are, IAD back heavy is the way to go. Lowest amount of recovery, least likely chance that you're going to get hit by them doing a beam, and higher chance of you punishing them with a super dash. And then off of doing something like that, you have the ability to go straight into 2M. If someone is holding up back, it can jail and catch them. You can then EX dive to try and jump after it. Or if you're pretty close to them or where the orbs are set up, you can dive, backdash, and kick even more orbs. Always keeping the pressure going when you do that. Or of course the other option, just do the good old push the orb plus super dash. And the cool part about what happens when you hit the orbs into the enemy, so if you just hit them with an orb like this, they just pop out really quick. But if you actually hit the orbs into them, like actually hit them, you have a lot of time to confirm said hits. So you can do something like Heavy the Orb, Super Dash, and you get a full screen confirm. Or if you're playing with a buff C assist, you can hit the orbs, call C assist, and you can try to confirm using that. There we go. So that's always a good thing as well. And the other cool part about if you do ID back heavy and you notice them hit, you can walk forward, push orbs, and you could also get a full-on combo from it. By doing ID back, you don't hit all the orbs, giving yourself a little shield in front. Which again, if your opponent has beams or they have ways to go through it, we'll talk more about that in part 3 with character-specific matchups. But that is the best way to use the 6 orbs. And it's a similar way if you manage to get these orbs out. ID backs are the way to go. Or if you have them scared enough to where they're just going to be sitting there worried to SD, you can just throw out a heavy, push the orbs at them, and then try to just keep pushing from there. Because the one thing that's very rare in this game, but something that's not talked about very often, is chip damage. Dragon Ball's not really known for having a lot of chip damage, but if you kick a bunch of orbs at them, you get a good amount of chip at least for this game standards. It's all blue health, of course, but still, you lock them down 10-15 seconds of just hitting them with orbs over and over, and that number will just keep adding up as they lose more and more health. Good way to try to force out sparks, or if they don't have a spark, you just kill them, which is a big plus. Besides the orbs, of course, like we just talked about, his main forms of getting in is the usual Super Dash, just in general using movement, his full screen 2M to go through Ki Blast, beams, and everything else. Or of course, and probably his strongest one because of how quick it is, his EX dive. 21 frames, full screen, and it tracks. Really quick, hard to react to, and if it hits, is a full confirm into a combo. Only downside being you lose your ground bounce in the process. But if you have an assist or you're going to level 3, it really does not matter. And a couple things to watch out for when you are playing neutral with Beerus. First off, the orbs are Ki Blast property. What that means is that if someone super dashes you, they will just go through the orbs. If someone tosses out Ki Blasts, they will go through the orbs. And even if you block the Ki Blast, the orbs will disappear. And then, of course, the last thing, which basically same idea. If they have a beam, the beam will go through them. So those are the things to watch out for. Each one have their own different ways of punishing. If they beam, you just jump in a super dash to punish. If they fire a bunch of Ki Blasts, you look to reflect in 2M. And then, of course, if they SD, you look to 2H. That's where the complicated part of his neutral comes in. He has an option to deal with everything that could come his way to deal with his orbs, but you have to be ready for any of the possibilities, and all those will come down to what characters on the other side of the screen and what options do they have. Alright, let's talk about Beerus' Blockstrings. Now, if we're not including meter, we'll start with that. For the most part, his Blockstrings are fairly normal compared to a lot of other characters. His strongest stagger button is his 4LL, being -3 on block. His 5M and his 5LL are both pretty good, being -5. So not the worst options, won't be punished for doing so. Please do not stagger on your 2M. You are -10, and much like Goku, you are probably going to die if anyone notices this. His 5H, although not bad, being -6 on block, Odds are you're not going to get punished because of the distance, but still not exactly the best in terms of staggers. Another really good stagger tool is one you might not think of. Typically, people like to go Ki Blast 5H to try and either bait Reflex, bait Super Dash, things like that. Although you can do that with Beerus, being the fact that he does have a similar thing with his Ki Blast being -2. It does push him back relatively far away. So what you should do instead is use a Sneeze. The pushback still happens as well, just not quite as much. And just like with Ki Blast, you're -2 on block. And the cool part about this is that, much like with Ki Blast, you can do Ki Blast 5H. Or, if you want to be a little extra special, you can do Ki Blast 5H Ki Blast. Or you can do Sneeze 5H Ki Blast Dive. Just little extra added options of what you can do to get your opponent guessing on what you might be doing. And if your opponent is guessing on what you're going to do next, that is when Beerus is at his most deadly. But Beerus' Blockstrings get far more interesting once we start adding in the meter. Main thing coming from the fact that Beerus' down kick of his EX orbs is +6 on block. So that's always another way of getting people to think while also making sure you get to steal your turn. Doing it at any point, doing it just off a jab, doing it off some mediums, double low kick, and then every time you're going to stay +6 as long as you do the down kick. Now, of course, the one issue with that, it wouldn't be at all fair in any way, shape, or form if you could just do that and just always be +6. Because it is an orb first, there is an option to reflect the kick. But don't fret too much. It's not like when you do the orbs they can just reflect every time, because since you have the ability to hold the orb and not kick them, you can set up your block string, and instead of kicking them, you just hold the button. And if you hold the button, if they don't reflect properly, or if both orbs hit at the same time, then they're going to reflect too late, and you're going to get a free punish for it. And that just adds more to the mind game that is the Beerus Blockstrings. We're not even going into the mix part yet of what they're going to have to do when it comes to that. But just on the Blockstring alone, you're going to have to deal with the stagger pressure. Are they going to stagger the Sneeze? Are they going to go for a heavy kick? Are they just going to do orbs? What are they going to do? And you always have to be wary. And the other part about the downward kicks is it's fast enough to where they can't just mash light out of it. And if they try to mash super dash, it will beat that too. So they can't mash between it, and they can't super dash it if you go for the low kick. One thing they can do, there is a slight gap between the orb and the kick. So technically there is a window where you could be hit by a DP, or you could be hit by a reversal level 1 or 3. But besides that though, the only option basically is reflect or don't. And that's what makes Beerus' pressure so scary when he gets in. He's got two really good stagger options, and his knees and his lights. He's got an anti-reflect and his 5LL. And if he comes in with meter, be warned, you are going to be watching this happen a lot. And at all times, at any point, he could always just decide to go for a mix while he's doing all these things. And that's what makes Beerus' pressure so damn terrifying and makes him one of the strongest offensive threats in this entire freaking game. Now let's start with the part that most people probably want to see most, and that is, how do you mix someone using Beerus? Well, as we talked about in part 1 about his orbs, there are two different orbs that show you how to do it. You got 236M, and you got 236H holding up. Both of these, since you have used them on the ground, has the ability to dash, or you can just land and go low, because thankfully there is no landing recovery for these. Because of that, it allows them to set up a true 50-50, while at the same time having the ability to dash over and go for a cross-up as well, making it all the more annoying for people to block if they do end up taking the mix. But we'll start with it, but let me real quick talk about the one downsides to this mix-up before we get to everything you can do about it. So first off, it is a Ki Blast, right? We talked about this before. Beerus orbs are Ki Blasts, and because they are Ki Blasts, once again, they can be reflected. So if you go for the if you go for the up orb, and you go for some kind of mix, you will get pushed away, and you will not get any kind of mix from it. And the other downside being the fact that against medium to tall characters, you run the risk, if you're up close, of losing the orb. And what exactly do I mean by losing the orb? Well, so the whole point of Beerus' orb kick is that he kicks the orb. I mean, it's basically in the name. I don't know if it's the actual name of the move, but that's basically what he does. He jumps up and he kicks the orb. And if he jumps up and kicks nothing though, he's minus a lot compared to when he kicks the orb, where he's plus a lot. And that's the risk you run in when it comes to medium to tall characters. If you're too close, you might jump up and kick nothing if they are standing up. And even if they're not standing up, a lot of people have been learning this, is if you're crouching but you reflect properly at the site of the EX, they can stand, reflect, and you're going to be minus a lot, which is not good because you are minus 13, and minus 13 is not a very good number for you, especially when you're going for a mix. The good thing though is especially with the rise of characters like Team Gohan and GT Goku coming out, is it doesn't matter if they're crouching, if they're standing, if they're not tall enough to ride the roller coaster, then they are just going to have to take this every time. They're going to have the same options everyone else does. They can reflect, they can try to mash super dash, but they are not going to be able to stand block the orbs, and they are not going to have the stand reflect OS. And I keep talking about them standing up, then standing up, then standing up. Now, what do I actually mean by that? Well, because of the fact that Beerus' orbs do lose to standing characters of those levels of heights, doesn't mean there isn't options. So, Beerus' mix is at its strongest, of course, when they are crouching. Because if they are crouching, then the orbs will be able to work. So, how do we get them to say crouching when you want to go for your mix? Well, you want to do it before you use all your lows. What do I mean by that? So Beerus, so it's like most characters, has the ability to do 2Ls and a 2M, and that's all of his lows. So if you do your do a full block string at this point, after this 2M, there's no chance of you going low anymore. After this 2M is done, you cannot go low anymore, and then everyone can just stand up and block in case the orb happens. So what we want to do instead is we want to go for the orb mix before we go for our 2M. So either 5LL, 5L, 2L, or go into it off of 5M. Because doing all of these will make it where you still have the option to go for a low, and people will still be blocking low out of fear of being hit by a Beerus 2M. That being said, is the mix dead if you go for a 2M first? No, of course not. If Beerus is not the last character up, you always have the option of just going for the mix-up and calling the assists. And even if they reflect the assist, you are still plus. So either can go for a mix off that, in which case they have to either decide, am I going to keep mashing reflect, in which case you could then punish them by doing nothing and baiting it, or you could always land in DR if they expect you to mix, or you just end up going for a couple of light mashes. And then if they reflect, the LL will anti-reflect, and if they don't do anything, then you just reset your pressure from there. The other option is as well, you can do a couple of normals to push yourself further away. So one option, which is a little bit risky because it involves you doing a 2H, is the fact that Beerus' 2H pushes them further away and puts you in the perfect location in order to be able to set up a mix. The other option is doing a couple staggers to then also put you slightly further away. Or the other option as well, sneeze into setup. All these things put you a little bit further away and makes it more likely to avoid the mix, or to avoid them reflecting your mix, I should say. So there is more than one way to get around this pressure, and even then, even if they do reflect it, you can always do a falling light afterwards, and depending on what they do afterwards, it's another round of RPS on will you win, will they win, or you could always just be extra annoying, go for it, and then just DP if you think they're going to mash. Very rude, very risky, but if it works, it's really funny. I do not recommend doing this. Please don't do this, but it'd be really funny if it works, though. Besides that, though, going away from the orb slightly, Beerus' normals do have a far enough reach to where you can go for a super dash 50-50. So you can never underestimate a good old super dash 50-50. They can reflect the super dash, of course, but if they're busy worrying about the orbs, they might not pay attention to you going for a super dash. And the other one of my personal favorite things to do is to stagger, be annoying, and then do IAD over and heavy. This does hit cross up, so your opponent does have to block the other direction. Or you can always jump a little bit further and then jump in and go for that for same side. Or set it up, think they're going to same side super dash. You always have these options as well. Or if you're worried about 2H, you can always do a jump forward and key blast to get them with that. The one worry you do have to worry about for this, though, is the fact that this jump over heavy is 2Hable. Basically, unless you call an assist to set up the gap, to mess around with the gap, doesn't matter what you do, they will be able to 2H this. That being said, though, be it in neutral when you're jumping in, being able to jump over heavy, if you're doing it just while doing a bunch of staggers, it's a very potent setup, and it'll catch a lot of people off guard, and is a great way not only to get hits, but if you are closer to the corner and you manage to take your turn, good old jump over heavy, and suddenly you're putting them in the Blockstring and you got them in the corner where Beerus is at his strongest. And speaking of being at his strongest, in the corner, this is probably should have gone into the Blockstring section, but we're going to bring it up with Mix anyways because it's technically Mix RPS, is again talking about his staggers off of his knees. And what do I mean by that? Well, when in the corner, because the sneeze is the thing that pushes them further away, compared to the key blast, which pushes you much further. When you go for the sneeze on the stagger, you are close enough to hit him with a 2L. And you could almost never ending go for something like this. How annoying is that? It's not quite 0 on block stagger annoying, but the fact that you're always close enough to be able to go for a sneeze and be able to 2L continue to string after that And at the same time, every time you do that, your opponent always has to be afraid of the fact that you could do 5H afterwards. And then if they block the 5H afterwards, you can then go for a dive and an assist. And go for an IAD low, or if they are crouching when you do that. You can go for a whiffed high, empty low, making his pressure extra scary. A little bit of extra mix options when going with your stagger off of the sneeze, which is absolutely insane in the corner. And Beerus has multiple ways to mix you while also having a way to beat everything. Downward kick will beat super dash as well as mash. Upward kick is just how you go for a mix. If people go for a reflect mash off of it or a super dash off it, if you're solo, you can just go for the mash to try and beat theirs. Or if you're not solo, you can call assist, almost guaranteeing the mix. And if you get them to the point where they're afraid to do anything, it is just a straight up high-low 50-50 from there. And you can just do whatever you want. And now, to the final part of this part, let us talk about options for Oki. So, Beerus has a lot. Alright, let's just say this. There are a lot of options for Oki with Beerus. But I'm going to focus on the main two that I use, because I think these two offer the most, while also covering the most options at the same time. So first off of the soft knockdown, which is the one you are most likely to see, is going to be off the 236M. And what I like to do is, while falling back with a 236M, I like to call an orb. Call the light orb and hold it. And what you do off of this is you jump forward and you punch the orb. You punch the orb with a light. And what this does is it covers the regular tech, as you saw there, Kid Buu getting hit by the orb. And if they up tech, they can get hit by that as well. Or even if they're a little too high, they'll still get caught anyways. And the scary part that most Beerus have to worry about, basically for all their Okis, are they going to super dash? Well, we don't care. That's the cool part about this tech option. If they regular tech, the orbs on top of them. If they up tech, the orb will still catch them. If they super dash, the up tech super dash, you can still catch them from there. And if they down tech, well, the orb is still just going to be there for when they get up. It is the, I want to say one of the simpler options for Beerus, but at the same time it basically covers all techs, and because of that, it makes it one of his most consistent Oki options in the game. Now the other option can come from a different ways. The easiest one comes from a sliding knockdown off of a smash property JH, or off of a Dragon Rush. And that is 236S. Now what can you do off 236S? Everything. Literally everything. You can IAD medium, IAD L. You can whiff high, go low. You can mash the auto combo and go for an overhead. And when everyone is too busy staring at the pretty lights, they might not see it coming, since they do have to block cross up and high for it. You can wait for the orbs to hit, and then you can hit them with the DR. If they go for a spark, you can just backdash 5H to then punish their spark. Works great as a spark bait. You can basically do whatever you want. And basically the only thing you ever have to worry about from this tech option is up tech, super dash. Because if they go for an up tech super dash and you go for the vast majority of these options, you're going to miss, they're going to get through, and you are going to get punished for doing it. And knowing how corners and super dashes work, you might get crossed up and suddenly you are the one in the corner. So there is a way to beat this, and it's kind of the obvious one, but I'll also show you the way that you can do something afterwards, even if it doesn't work. And how do you beat this? You just 2H. That's it, you just 2H. And let's just say the situation happens where you see them up tech and you think they are going to super dash and you want to be ready for it, but they don't. You can still 2H, and then you can just cancel into orbs. So not only do you have the option of covering a super dash, but you could then go straight into a orb below kick, and then suddenly you are plus a lot. So either way, that is basically the safe option on dealing with people who might want to super dash you, while still being able to keep your plus frames. You lose the somewhat mix that comes from the fact that you can basically do whatever you want off of these giant orbs. But you instead you are safe. You are plus, and if you go for it off of the 236S, well, you still have a couple of orbs there to mess with to keep them busy, which works great from there. But that's not the only way to set that up, of course. The DR as well as the 6H, sorry, the 5H in the air are not the only ways to do it. The other ways to do it is if you save your dash, you can dash forward and go for the orb. Or if you don't want to save it and you have abundance of bar, or you just want the Oki, you can 214H, dash forward and go for the orbs from there, and it'll hit meaty. You technically can do it off of 214M as well without the dash. It's just not going to hit meaty, which is the one downside to it. So if you are going to go for that off of a dive, I would recommend either keeping the dash if you don't want to spend the meter, risking a little less damage, but you at least get the Oki, or spending the half a bar, losing half a bar, doing a bit more damage, but you get the meaty Oki, because when it's meaty, it is at its strongest. Okay, I lied somewhat. We are going to talk about one more Oki, but we're not going to talk about it as much as these other ones. And that Oki is because it is character specific. And by character specific, I mean 2 characters. This Oki is specifically for Labcoat and Janemba. Why Labcoat and Janemba? Because Janemba can wake up and just projectile counter your orb, basically shutting off your Oki. And Labcoat, well, she just spins through your orb. So there is a Oki specifically for them, and you don't have to learn anything special about it because it's basically the same as one of the previous ones, and that is the soft knockdown Oki from the dive. It's just, instead of jumping up and hitting the orb, because you have to eat the spin, instead you're going to dash forward and 5H. Now, why do that? Because 5H will beat it. And the pushback on Beerus' 5H pushes them back into the orb, pushing the orb into Labcoat or Janemba, allowing you to confirm the combo. And just like that, you get over 5,000 damage because they decided to wake up spin or wake up counter because they saw an orb. Again, very character specific, and we might not be seeing as many lab codes or Gen Embas nowadays as we did before, but it's still a very useful Oki to have, and when it hits, odds are their character is dead, and if lab code or Gen Emba is dead, Beerus is a very happy cat. And now that we're done talking about what you do when you get a knockdown, what happens if you don't have one? Well, there is one that I like to do. So typically, when you don't have a knockdown, people might just do a dive afterwards. You can, but you don't really get anything off of that. So what I like to do is I do a knockdown just with heavy. Not only do you get better Oki off it, but you get a fun little setup at the same time. So what I have to do off it is after you get the hit, assuming you don't have a knockdown, as you're falling, set up an orb. And when by setting up the orb, you set up to cover more tech options as well as possible frame traps or mix-ups. And if you're wondering what happens if they up tech, well, the cool part about setting up the orb like that is that the orb drags them down. So if they're not expecting it or they don't know about it, it's a free low. Or even if they do and they block it, you can just ID and go high. You can be a little cheeky and just go for a DR. Or if you think they might super dash, since that's probably one of the only options really against it, is you can 2H it. The timing on the orb is a little tricky on shorter characters though, is the one issue on that. Is when they up tech, you'll catch them every time, doesn't matter the character height. But on short characters, the orb timing to be able to catch them while still being in the air to not miss out on your plus frames is a little tricky. So the other option you can go for, in order to still be able to keep your plus frames while making it a little easier, is by doing a EX down kick. You won't be able to really get a mix up off of it if you do. However, you are +9, so you can go whatever you want after that. So even though you might not have a very good Oki, if you don't have the dive, or you don't spend assist for DR, or you don't have one. You still have a decent way to go, even if you don't. And of course, if we're talking about mid-screen, he doesn't really have too much when it comes to that if you don't have a knockdown. But it's basically going to be a similar idea. You're going to want to use your orbs in some way to go for it. To try and keep your advantage and try and be plus. And that is it. You are now Beerus Masters. Okay, not quite. I've given you guys a lot of information about Beerus. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming, but if I missed anything, feel free to let me know down in the comments below, so that way I can try to explain anything either more in depth, or I can try to explain anything I might have missed. But other than that, there will be one more part where we are going to go over more character-specific stuff, much like what we did here with Lab Coat. We're doing it more on a general sense. Characters with Ki Blast, characters without Ki Blast, characters with beams, characters with lariats, and how I play those style of matchups. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to go into everyone's favorite part, the combos. So make sure you guys hit the subscribe button down below. That way you guys don't miss part 3 when that comes out. Until next time, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Until next time, I will talk to you guys later. Bye, guys.